listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. It's attracted hundreds of millions of diehard fans across the globe, broken streaming records, taken over social media, and even crept into Macca's Happy Meals. And now Squid Game is launching its third and final season today.
It's Netflix's most watched program ever. Bigger than Wednesday, bigger than Bridgerton, bigger than Stranger Things. It is huge. It has become this global phenomenon.
So what's behind the series' cult-like success? Who's the man behind it? And will its final season live up to expectations? Find out in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Friday, the 27th of June.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're starting today overseas where Iran's supreme leader says the US has gained nothing from its strikes on the country's nuclear sites in his first televised address since the ceasefire with Israel was announced. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who's been in hiding since Israel began attacking Iran 2 weeks ago, says Donald Trump exaggerated the extent of damage and its nuclear program hasn't been disrupted. He also claims Iran's strikes on the US airbase in Qatar have dealt a heavy blow, despite all but one of its missiles being intercepted and no casualties or reports of significant damage. Now, the Supreme Leader has since threatened more strikes on American bases if Iran was attacked again.
Yeah, and just on that point about the extent of damage on Iran's nuclear program, whether it was significant or not, that's something that hasn't gone away with US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, the latest to slam what he says are contradicting reports.
Because of decisive military action, President Trump created the conditions to end the war, decimating, obliterating, destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities. I can say here that the assessment is that we significantly damaged the nuclear program, setting it back by years. I repeat, years.
America's top general and the head of the CIA has also since come out to say the sites were severely damaged and will take years to rebuild. Oh, and in case you were wondering if Donald Trump made it home from the NATO summit in the Netherlands, here's official word from the White House.
What am I listening to?
That is a legit post from the White House, Tara.
Oh my gosh.
And it comes after the head of NATO yesterday called Trump Daddy.
Yeah, and it's not the first time in recent days that a kind of parody song is doing the rounds on social shared by the White House and Trump. He's also shared this song to Truth Socials this week. Now, this parody song isn't new. It dates back to the 70s and it has been used by Republicans for years, but critics have come out and said that it does feel a bit distasteful and kind of wild to see it on social media used in this way by the President of the United States, given that people are dying. And it's kind of the same with Trump's commentary around the daddy comment. And he was also saying Iran and Israel were arguing like school kids and, you know, just simplifying and reducing war to kind of like a childlike playground fight.
Yeah, it's literally insane. I can't believe that we're talking about it on headlines, to be completely honest with you. But briefly, while we're in the Middle East, Israel has this morning stopped aid from entering northern Gaza, alleging that they're cracking down on Hamas looters. And importantly, during the 12-day war with Iran, more than 800 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, either shot as they were seeking food or in waves of Israeli strikes. So now that things are starting to simmer down with Iran and Israel, I know that the White House might be taking the piss out of what's going on in the globe, but there are things that deserve our attention.
The jury deciding the fate of Sean Diddy Combs at his sex trafficking and racketeering trial have been told he felt he was above the law because of his fame, wealth and power. Combs' trial in Manhattan is coming to an end, with closing arguments now underway, and the jury having heard all of the evidence and testimonies from 34 witnesses, including his former staff, male escorts and federal agents.
Beginning the closing arguments, US prosecutors told the jury Diddy used violence and fear to get what he wanted and had a close inner circle of employees who would carry out his criminal requests for 20 years. The assistant US attorney argued that Diddy has carried out hundreds of brutal crimes, many of which the jury's now heard in detail, including bribery, kidnapping an employee, arson, and attempting to blow up a car.
And the jury was also reminded of evidence given by Diddy's ex-partner, Cassidy Ventura, and another woman going by the name of Jane, who both detailed how Diddy would use force, threats and manipulation to get them to take part in freak-offs with dozens of sex workers. And the prosecution has argued that if the jury believes that even one of these freak-offs was coerced, they must find Combs guilty.
Meanwhile, his defence team's expected to give their closing address later today, having previously told the jury that while they might conclude Diddy is a bad guy who's committed acts of domestic violence, it doesn't amount to the allegations he's facing. Combs didn't testify at the trial and has pleaded not guilty to all charges.
The global cocaine trade keeps breaking records, with it being the world's fastest growing illicit drug market. That's the finding of the UN's fresh World Drug Report, with production, seizures and use of cocaine all hitting new highs.
As to the specifics, illegal production rose by a third in the last 12 months to a record high of more than 3,700 tonnes, while the drug is being used by around 8 million more people than a decade ago, now reaching an estimated 25 million people a year. And what's driving it? Well, the UN's Office of Drugs and Crime says it's got to do with Colombia, where production is surging, and more uptake from users across Europe and North and South America.
Yeah, and as to where Australia is getting the most of its cocaine from, the report found that's North America, Mexico and Central America, as well as the Andean countries like Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, sometimes pit stopping in Southeast Asia before getting here directly. Now, in terms of cocaine use in Australia, we do have government data that shows around 4.5% of the population, or around 1 million Aussies, actually use it every year. And it's the second most used illicit drug behind cannabis.
Is the Queensland Government the pot calling the kettle black? Well, a cohort of the public and conservationists think so. They've slammed the state government for passing legislation to exempt the Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games from environment and planning laws.
Yeah, the controversial bill was passed this week to streamline the delivery of Games infrastructure, but the Queensland Conservation Council says it's a total double standard, with its director Dave Copeman saying the government should have to follow the same rules as everyone else.
We would hate to see future actions where the government decides, because something's a rush, that they're going to get rid of environmental protections, get rid of community engagement rights, to shut down on First Nations cultural heritage rights, and they're going to remove judicial oversight.
He says it sets a negative precedent and the Olympics shouldn't get a free pass just because it's on a timeline. Oh, which is something I very much agree with, Tara Cassidy. I see the point. I mean, why have these laws in the first place if the government can just, at their own discretion, pass legislation, but they can just override them when they want, and it sets one set of rules for a certain industry or a certain community, yet another for politicians. It's got me fired up this morning.
And to that point, I mean, in the same week, the same government actually introduced new processes for large-scale solar farms, and that renewable energy rollout is also on the clock, but is being made to navigate strict social impact assessments. So same argument, but different set of rules, you know?
Yeah, and I think just in this broader economy of whatever the heck is going on with the economy at the moment, people don't want to see government spending blowing out and becoming this big, extravagant thing. I mean, look, there's been long debate and tensions over whether the Olympics can generate enough revenue. I mean, we have global examples to suggest that it might, but currently in this current climate, it looks like the cost to get it running versus what we're going to get in return isn't looking too promising. So very interesting to see how this will unfold.
And in news that will surely make Shakespeare turn in his grave, 11 new Aussie words have been added to the Oxford Dictionary, and unsurprisingly, they've got a bit to do with footy and booze. Chris, any guesses?
I was going to say grog or coldy, but apparently they're already in there.
Yeah, they are, which is surprising to me, but very on theme. So the word goon has been added, which is now officially in the dictionary as a plastic foil-lined pouch in which inexpensive wine is sold.
Oh, what a bang-on definition, dead set.
Cask, so the box the goon is in. Slab, like a slab of beer. Spew, but not the vomiting kind, as in if you're spewing because you're bitterly disappointed or annoyed at something. And can for the footy tragics, the colloquial way of saying, come on, come on.
And just a note there, spewing doesn't have a G on the end. They've actually spelt it the way that we spell it. It is so impressive. Yes, we are real wordsmiths here down under. But I mean, can we really be surprised by this? The Oxford Dictionary previously added Riz to its pages. You know, the Gen Z and Alpha term for having charisma, having Riz. Like, I love throwing that word around, and it was one that through our colleague who fills in on the headlines sometimes, Dan Mullins, we kind of like to throw these words at him, and we quizzed him the other week about Riz.
Oh my gosh.
He thought it was like a cracker. I think he was getting confused with Ritz. And then we threw pop off baddie. That's a new one we're teaching him. And Dan will walk the listener halls just saying, I'm popping off, baddie.
Oh my gosh. Look, I love it. And I do love Aussie slang. And I love seeing those videos where like tourists and people from around the world hear the slang, you know, trying to figure out what on earth it means. It's so good. And it got me thinking, like, what are some other Aussie slang terms that just need to be added to the dictionary already? Like, I kind of thought like slap, but not like striking something with your hand, rather like going for a slap at the pokies.
Yeah,
you know?
or like that slaps, that steak slaps. Like, it's
a
good thing.
I think that needs to go in there. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think listening? Let us know in our broadcast channel. We want to find out what are some other terms, slang that needs to be in the dictionary. We'll chuck a prompt in the channel.
We will. And that brings our headlines to a close for this week. A massive, massive week of news. But up next is your deep dive, Tara Cassidy, looking into the world of Squid Game. It's the Netflix show that's taken over the world. Stick around. That's coming up for you next.
With that, let the game begin.
Green light.
Yes, today is the day the third and final season of Squid Game is hitting our TV screens. And if you're just deciding to tune into the series for the first time, you'll be joining nearly 600 million others around the world that have lent their eyeballs to the South Korean dystopian survival thriller to date. So what is it about this series that has managed to take the world by storm, break global viewing records, shift pop culture, become a worldwide marketing sensation, and even prompt a surge in people wanting to learn the Korean language? Well, to answer those questions today is Mawunyo Gbogbo, pop culture and entertainment reporter for the ABC. Mawunyo, welcome back to the briefing. Season 3 of Squid Game is out today. After 2 incredibly successful seasons before that, it's turned into a viral social media trend, Halloween costumes, tourist attraction. What do you think is behind the cult-like success that it's had?
Well, basically, it's an excellent show. You know, like the cult-like success comes down to the fact that it's just a really good show. So I enjoyed season 1. I remember I was sitting in front of Netflix, not sure what to watch, and I just saw it pop up and I thought, oh, I'll give this a go. So it was before all the hype. And I just sat there, I watched the first episode and I was like, wow, this is incredible. I binge watched the whole thing. And so that seems to be what a lot of people have done. So 1.65 billion viewing hours in the first 28 days. And it's Netflix's most watched program ever. So that's bigger than Wednesday, bigger than Bridgerton, bigger than Stranger Things. It is huge. And so the phenomenon comes down to the fact that it's the type of story where it's about, for the uninitiated, it's about a bunch of people who have no money, you know, they're completely broke. They have a chance to win a massive cash prize. And so they kind of sign on to do this. And it turns out that it's a deadly competition that they have to win in order to win this competition. So they play children's games. And they may seem simple, you know, they're children's games, but the consequences are deadly. And so the high stakes of the show also makes it something that people just want to watch.
Yeah, it's like the storyline is interesting, the visuals are quite appealing, it's very different, and even like you said, the games and the music, it's like it's just really hit the nail on the head with all of those things into one. Season 2, it was still incredibly successful, still did really well. There was some feedback from some fans that didn't think it was as good. I got to say I was one of them. What was it about Season 2 that maybe wasn't as good? What does Season 3 have to be a success, do you think?
So I think season 1 really captured the zeitgeist because it was new and different. Season 2, unfortunately, was a little bit forgettable, as you say. But I think season 3, I've already previewed the first 2 episodes. Netflix sent them to me, and I can't say anything about them. But I will say that it is excellent. So far I'm getting right into it, like I was back in season 1. If it can keep up that momentum that it already has within the first 2 episodes, it is going to be an absolute game changer when it comes to television, Korean television, because already it's a game changer, right? They won 6 Emmys, including for the director, the guy that created it, as well as the lead actor. It has become this global phenomenon. So I'm so excited to watch the rest of season 3.
Yes, I'm very jealous that you've already had a pre-screening, and it's good to hear that you think that it'll live up to season 1, because that was my only worry. I really loved season 1. Season 2, I was with the critics in that space, so I'm really happy to hear that. Now, earlier you did mention that, this series, the idea behind it was, there was games, they had this deadly twist. And what I thought was interesting is that it did hinge off these kind of children's games, and part of that actually has exploded into the children's space in the real world. Like you see kids' costumes, McDonald's Happy Meal toys and games that are around Squid Game. Is that interesting or surprising to see that, like, essentially a series that's aimed at adults can actually cross that barrier and not be limited to like an adult genre, that it's actually being aimed at kids in the outside world?
It's not too surprising to me because adults loved it so much, right? And so as a consequence, adults are going to create things like Happy Kids toys for kids. I think that it was such a global phenomenon that it's really hard to leave the kids out of this, especially when you're playing children's games. Obviously, it's not a show for kids. I definitely would not encourage any children to watch Squid Game. But it's spawned out into things like Squid Game, the experience at Luna Park, which I'm not sure whether there's an age limit in terms of who can play those games. It's had the game experience on Netflix as well, like a real life game experience. So it's really exploded. So it's really hard to keep it away from children because it's such a phenomenon.
It's the costumes and everything like that kind of does find itself, like, it would be interesting to kids. They'd be a little bit excited watching. I remember being that age and being like, I'm definitely going to go and find out what this is all about. Now, you mentioned it before, the writer, the creator, director of Squid Game, Hwang Dong-hyuk is his name. He has a pretty interesting story himself and the way that Squid Game actually came to be. Can you tell me anything about that?
Yeah, so he originally came up with this idea when he was experiencing his own financial hardship, which is quite interesting, and so he wrote this as a movie, I believe, in 2008. But it took years and years and years of shopping it around before a production company was willing to support it. And then Netflix came along and signed on in 2019. And then obviously the first few episodes, season 1 came out in 2021. And it became such a global sensation that Hwang obviously made a name for himself. But interestingly, he didn't actually plan to make seasons 2 and 3. There was only meant to be the 1 season because he was saying it just took so much out of him the first season. He said he lost 8 teeth making it.
Wow.
He said it was just crazy because he was the writer, the director, the producer, he was doing everything himself. Well, obviously he had a team as well, but he was doing a lot himself. And so basically he also didn't fully finish the story. And I think it's ironic that capitalism, like the show's about capitalism, really. It's like a stinging critique of capitalism. And interestingly, one of the reasons he came back to make it is because of money. He didn't make enough money from season 1. I don't know what type of deal he had with Netflix, but he told the BBC he didn't actually make much money from season 1. And so he came back because of the money. but he told the New York Times that the success of the series has not corrupted him at all. He still drives his 10-year-old car, which to me is insane because, like as soon as I had a little bit of money, I bought a BMW. So even though it was going to take me 30 years to pay it off.
I will admit that pre-Squid Game, I wasn't someone who was a huge fan of international movies and series, purely because not anything to do with the actual content and creativity. It was just around subtitles and dubbing. But for Squid Game, I persevered and it really kind of opened my eyes that I've been missing out on this whole other world. Do you think that it has done that for a lot of people? Like it's really opened up to whether it be Aussies or other people around the globe that maybe haven't dabbled in Korean cinema, TV before to give it a crack?
It has actually had a huge impact on people seeking out Korean drama. And Netflix has a section with K-drama, with shows like When Life Gives You Tangerines and Crash Landing on You. And Netflix says that Aussies are more interested in learning the Korean language now, but since 2020, Australians watching Korean content on Netflix has increased nearly 40%.
Wow.
Driven by the release of Squid Game in September 2021. So it has had a huge effect. Even SBS reports a significant increase in people wanting Korean content in Australia due to the word of mouth popularity of Squid Game.
That's incredible. What an impact. Gosh, if only I could write something that would have such an influence on the world. It's just incredible. Thank you so much for having a chat to us today about it as well. And hopefully you'll be tuning in for the rest of it. I assume you will be now that you've already seen
Absolutely.
First 2 episodes. I will definitely be tuning in as soon as I can later today. Really appreciate your time with me today on The Briefing.
Thank you so much.
That was Mawunyo Gbogbo, pop culture and entertainment reporter for the ABC, speaking with me there about the global success story of Squid Game, which has its 3rd and final season out today, June 27. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.